Regarding the future of poker, I know a lot of us up here, the vast majority of the work we do, either as a professional, player professional, or a business professional, we're just trying to keep in mind the decisions we make have to be good for the future of poker. So whether it's an entrepreneurial adventure, whether it's an operational leader, whether you're being a player, I just think like if all the decisions we are making keeps in mind the growth of the industry versus maybe what's best for ourselves or what's best for the business, I think that's super important. So it's been a pleasure to be here. Antonio knows that I believe in this concept so much that I was going to do something similar in the States. I really, really want to recognize Fintan and Antonio because it takes a lot to do this. Like, this is not an easy job. It's a risk. It is labor intensive. And just, I know all of us, and 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, I know this will continue to grow due to your efforts, and just want to say thank you.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be Jerry Springer, and we'll come into the audience, and I want to hear your thoughts about what you thought was what stood out to you. So I'm going to start with you.
Over the past sort of 6-7 years, which was very sad to see. It became very corporate. It became very less player friendly. And I feel that the big guys, the WPTs, the WPT Globals, the GG Pokers, the Poker Stars need to come into a room and be humble enough to listen to what is not right from the players, from the people that are part of this industry and that make this industry so wonderful and so beautiful. And so this is definitely the first step, and I am super excited to see what's coming next.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, some of us are here in the room, like willing to talk to the community, willing to get involved, willing to answer questions. So I think that's a really positive step forward. Does anybody have a question for any of the panel? Who has the first question for the panel, I should say? Juan Fintan. Making it difficult for our film crew here.
Thank you, Alex. Karim, I really following you closely for the last kind of year and a half. And every time I think of you and what you're doing, I just say, how does that man make a living? I'm like just absolutely really impressed by, you know, your passion for what you're doing. So how do you make a living?
Is there any tax people? HMRC? No. So what we do in our campaign, Poker Against Plastic Pollution, doesn't make any money. But the other side of the business, which funds the campaign, does make money. So it really was a sort of like a waking up where I'm filling out this bag, you know, privileged to bag some chips. And I thought to myself, I can provide these guys with some bags, but I know that they can't afford to have them. You know, you look at a bag and you think, well, we don't need all of this. You don't need that on there. You don't need that on there. All of these extra things started causing the prices to go up, and also the energy that you use to actually manufacture them. So our whole thing was let's streamline the whole manufacturing process to make sure we're not overusing the energy. And when you say to me, Karim, I'll take X amount of bags, it's really it's a testament to that the whole community is together, that we can. It's a tiny industry. I know it's a massive industry within itself, but for what we do, it's very small. And it's amazing that, you know, everyone is getting on board when they can. I know that a lot of operators and casinos, they have to answer to other people. If marketing was one section, and it's completely different, but our bags offer a whole awareness marketing. And that was the way I knew that I would get people on board to do it, because if we're trying to get everyone together, breaking down those silos and different departments and just saying, look, you know, this is going to help, let's go with these guys. And everyone's been literally helping out to make sure that that happens. So it's been good. And just to let everyone know that, so we started off in the UK, it's come to Ireland, and we've gone to parts of Europe. And then at the end of the year, we're going to be all over the US and Canada as well. So the product itself will be, you know, I'm not going to be funding it so much. It will be able to carry itself and everything else. And I might be able to get a drink out of it.
Fair play to you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for that. Who has the next question, please? I'm going to start picking on people. Here we go.
And he will.
Here we go.
He will. Don't.
I will. I'm going to pick on. Okay. Here you go.
Cheers, guys. Pete from Poker News. Probably a question for Andy, really. Obviously, I grew up watching you on like World Series of Poker. What's your thoughts really on obviously televised poker? Because obviously now it's most of the WSOP coverage is behind a firewall, which I don't think is particularly good for the game. Obviously on terrestrial TV, we used to have, different versions of poker, which is not so much these days. Why do you think that's happened? And do you think that opening it back up again would get more of the young kind of crowd into poker?
That is a big question. I suppose maybe a better way, a way I could answer it is the small changes that everybody makes to engage and include in an authentic manner poker players, but also people who are working. Everybody. Every little small step which improves an engagement and an interest is a good thing. So, I mean, I have a few thoughts, but lots of people would have others. But I think it's probably important to. But back in the day, there was more of a focus on people's characters as such, and the change has been kind of quite subtle. Yeah, but what's happened is, rather than there being a focus on people's characters, there's been a focus on commentators describing people's characters, which is a different thing. The difference is quite subtle, but I think it's just moved towards that, because what happened was commentators became stars in their own right, or people with reputations, or people with positions of power. So the balance shifted. And it was a subtle shift, and now it's that their view on the people, which is it should have been 50%, but it's gone to kind of 70%. So anything which maybe changes that, I think, would change televised poker, but maybe because methods would need to be come up with, which of how you interview people, because there was a lot more money back in the middle of the poker boom, so there was ESPN, all the rest of it, and they put a lot more money into it, so they had a lot more time to do production. So I think we have to be creative to actually try and almost get more of the characters out, yeah. And then one of the ways to support that is we'd have to look at the events and think at the events, when people go to the events, they need to be supported with and engaged with more. Because the world has changed, and people to move them away a little bit from the phones, yeah, is an effort which requires everybody's thoughts. And I'd actually, are there any thoughts that spring to other people's minds about this? These are just a couple that come to my mind, but has anyone else got a thought on that? Because it's maybe one of the best question,
Yeah, so I want to comment on this because you struck a chord with me when you said characters. I think our industry needs character development from our top poker personalities, whether you are a champion or an influencer or a content creator. And that's very difficult depending upon the person's personality, right? They have to be open to it. Before I was in business in the poker industry, I was just a part-time player in the corporate world elsewhere. And then when I came into the industry 6 years ago, the first conversation I ever had was with Matt Berkey, who many of you may know as, one of the highest stakes poker players in the world. And that whole conversation revolved around, how do we figure out a way for the best and brightest poker players to develop a persona and promote that persona for the betterment of the game? And some of you might laugh, but have you ever heard of the World Wrestling Entertainment Company, WWE? We need some WWE mentality and storylines and characters and appeal in this industry to garner more to garner more interest from people outside the industry, right? And I have to tell you, I'm being selfish right now saying this, but I am struggling with how to do that, because if you look at the website of Above the Felt Entertainment, one of the things it said when we started 3 years ago was to help inject this type of character development and storylines into this industry. We haven't done a good job of it. But I think if enough of the right people come together, we can, but it's got to be coordinated. And what does the poker community lack a little bit of? Coordination. So it struck a chord with me. I had to talk about it. But if anybody here or watching or together can just start talking about this more, how do we develop a more character-centric persona to promote to the public? I think that could be amazing for the future of poker. You nailed it. Nailed it.
And the thing about it is that, so back in the day, what happened? What was different? Well, what was different for a period, and it almost happened by surprise, was that people that weren't interested in poker, people's parents, their wives, their sisters, it was made in such a way where, or it just happened in such a way, maybe it wasn't planned, that there was loads of people that were interested like that. Now, what's happened now is slowly as the jargon has creeped in, every time someone says plus EV, that's another couple of people are away, you know? Or every time somebody says any of that jargon at all, there is a consequence in relation to the number of, other people that would actually sit down and have a look at that. And I think it's seeped into a lot of the commentary, it's seeped into the way that people talk. So it's a conversation to be had. It's one thing saying, hey, I'm all up for the growth of poker. But if other people who are not poker players don't understand, or being alienated from what's being said, then that's, and it's happened gradually. I don't think anyone's intended it. It's just sort of slowly happened. So anything which changes that is a big deal.
I think it's almost been done. Sorry, I'll come back to you in a second. I think it's been done intentionally to cater to the existing audience, if you know what I mean. Like the WSOP and WPT broadcasts developed this new audience that became more sophisticated, and then we started talking to them as a more sophisticated customer, and we forgot about the new customers coming in, if you know what I mean. Alec, you were going to say something.
I think it's a really good point both of you guys made, but I think the language is quite unique because it's, what people use to communicate and how they see the world. And there's a lot of things that are easier to say in poker vernacular, like explaining to someone that understands poker, these are all the types of hands that they could have in a given spot, or just say their range. Like range is a very effective way to describe a poker term. So it's like, it's hard to not do this. I'm definitely guilty as well, but that's a really good point. I also thought, like, just in general, I think this is a problem in poker, but I think it's also maybe a phenomenon of just the way, like Andy was saying, the world has changed. Like, how many of you guys watch? I'm just curious. I could be wrong about my hypothesis, but I want to test it. So how many of you saw like the Olympics, like 2000, 2004, like Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps? Did a lot of people watch it? Okay. Who saw 2024 Paris? Did anybody see it? Same hands? Okay, so a lot of people are still watching the Olympics. My thought was that a lot of less people are watching something like the Olympics, so I thought maybe poker would fall into a similar struggle of like just so much attention is siloed in different ways where it's hard to get attention. But being behind a paywall, like you said, is also a big challenge, and it's like people have mixed opinions on that. It's become like sort of politicized. They're a business, so they have the rights, and it makes sense from their point of view. So I understand that decision as well. I'm not like necessarily against it, but obviously it being on ESPN and following the characters and really having repeat characters year after year, I thought was also really cool, because it was cool to see, hey, this person won a bracelet last year. Are they going to win it this year? Or they made a big all-in bluff last year. They screwed up. Are they going to have redemption this year? And we saw that in the early days of online poker, where they had a long time horizon with how they shaped the narrative of these characters. And that's why, like, I grew up watching you as well, and I could remember all of the people that I grew up watching, but I don't really have that same affection today with people that like I watch. Yeah, you could watch people in different mediums, but it's not the same. There's not these larger than life characters And I think going back to that would be cool. I think there's a race car show that does this really well. I forgot the name of it on Netflix.
Yes.
But like they made race car driving cool for people that didn't watch race car
Well,
driving.
this is what Andre was about to tell us.
I
So
think we
I'm
need
gonna,
that
I'm
as
gonna
well
hand
in
the
poker.
microphone over.
Yes, I wanted to mention that Netflix did a good job with Drive to Survive. I don't know if it actually relaunched Formula One in the United States. Now it's a huge deal there, and the racing is super boring. But they made it so that you follow the character. So I recommend that you watch this because my wife, who doesn't care about Formula One, was hooked on it, and we binged it like 4 seasons in one night. And yeah, so like, and there's also this Welcome to Wrexham with another documentary around here in the Wales, I guess, and something like that. Just go to Netflix and make a poker show. Someone.
So I can.
So yeah, go on, Tom. Why haven't you done that?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, what I'm going to talk about now was a very grassroots documentary called Dreamers, a new age poker documentary that we decided to make a couple of years ago. It's not wildly popular. It's got maybe 200-some thousand views, but so much of the feedback we got back from people outside of the industry enjoying it. And people inside the industry appreciated it because it showed poker in a different light. This was a very rough way of trying to raise the ceiling of some of the poker personalities on Above the Felt, where the structure was this. The first 30 minutes was just character development. Everyone got a few minutes, you told their story. Hopefully people who are interested in that type of, biographical kind of documentary liked it. They got to know the players. They learned like, oh wow, they're not a bunch of degenerates just sitting in the corner of a casino. These are like really well-spoken individuals. The next 30 minutes was like taking people on a ride of the ups and downs of tournament poker through the lens of some of these players. And the next 30 minutes was like success, right? When Rampage won his first ever 25K at the WPT Championship. So it was the story arc of trying to show people that poker players aren't necessarily who you think they are, right? And this industry is not necessarily what you think it is. But it was literally something that was supposed to be a couple 20-minute vlogs. We said, oh, well, crap, we're going to turn this into an hour-and-a-half documentary with 3 people, right? It was well-produced, but it wasn't Netflix-produced. Taking that type of concept and pitching it to a company like Netflix and getting a buy-in from the casinos to be able to film, to getting the right players involved to be able to film, to show the value of why people would want to watch is insanely difficult. I know right now in this industry, there are companies trying to do it, right? But again, I think it comes back to coordination. So I'm with you, man. If there's a way we can bring some of the top companies together with a lot bigger budgets than some of us have here, then it's like, how do we really present something like this, pre-produce something like this, pitch it to an organization like Netflix or Hulu or et cetera. But again, it goes back to that word coordination. And that is something that I think is absolutely imperative in the future for poker. Some of the biggest and brightest companies in the world, instead of competing versus each other for the player wallet, let's start coordinating with each other for the benefit of the industry.
So that issue comes up a lot, actually, the issue of coordination and cooperation in online poker. I think it's important to remember that we're not allowed to do that, right? There is competition law requires us to not cooperate on many things. Because when, historically, when big companies cooperate with each other, they fix prices and they generally make the market worse for the end customer. We've been trying to do this for God knows how many years with game integrity, right? We've been trying to get people to cooperate on an industry-wide blacklist of violators. We've been trying to share game integrity techniques with each other, and even that can't get off the ground or hasn't got off the ground yet. I continue to be interested in that. For everybody watching on YouTube who's interested in starting a cooperation, I'm still interested in making it happen, but that is extraordinarily difficult as well. Any more comments on this? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Mark from Poker News. That what you've just said is actually partly what my question was for the future. Oh, and in line with game integrity and working together, can you see a future where there's a third party that coordinates, where it would allow you to do it from a regulation point of view, where you had a third party?
Probably. I think the way that it would most likely get off the ground is if it were mandated by some country's regulation. So, and the companies, sorry, the countries that have the most power in terms of regulation are the UK and the US. Any US regulator could make this happen, and the UK regulator could as well. So yeah, you are required to do this. You are required to share information on known cheats. That's all they would have to say, and then the industry would figure out a way around it. The problem is there are too many barriers right now, legal barriers, compliance barriers, and things in the way of making it happen. We need a regulator to force the issue, and then everybody will have to figure it out, right? Any more thoughts on that?
I think something else I'm passionate about is just sharing, like some of the work I do at Conscious Poker, and my personal brand is just sharing things that I learn in poker that I think apply to general life and business investing outside of poker. And I noticed that some companies in the US do this as well. I think Shoshana Group, like an investment firm, hires poker players, or they teach poker to their employees to become better investors. They learn things like risk management, they learn bankroll management, they learn to think in risk reward terms, or learn about asymmetry when they're trading options. And a lot of these techniques that apply to investing, of course, it's a little bit more easy of a transition, but also just to general decision making in life and business as well. And so I think that's another way that people could be interested in poker, because it's a little bit more like, what's in it for me? Like, people are self-motivated. So if someone's, I spoke once at a executive conference at Cisco, and they were interested for their executive team about how they could be better decision makers, and like, what could you teach me about something, you know, you do at the poker table that could help the executives make better decisions, you know? So it was about them. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about poker. It was like, poker was just the vehicle to communicate something that benefited people that weren't interested in poker. And this made them interested in poker, because now there was something for them to gain from learning poker. And then because, you know, if the talk goes well, or the idea is good, or it's presented in a way that's accessible, not using language that you know, loses people, right? If you communicate something like, I don't necessarily think in terms of binary terms, but I think in terms of a lot of different ways that a hand could be played, and you're explaining a concept of range or something. I think it could be more translatable to other industries, and that could bring people into poker, because now they have a reason to learn, and then they say, oh wow, that talk was really interesting. You know, Andy Duke writes about this, Thinking in Bets. She's a great book. There's people that are doing this outside of, you know, bridging poker over into the other areas of life too. And I think that's really important, because that touches a lot of different industries that otherwise wouldn't look at poker. And then they say, hey, maybe I'm going to go play and learn and get better at this aspect. So that's really something I'm passionate about as well. I think it could also, you know, grow the game in a different way.
I think that's a great point. Actually, there's an example of this where I think business can benefit from understanding poker a little bit more. You often see businesses say that they're looking for people who are results oriented. And actually, in poker, we know that being results oriented is one of the last things you want. And this is, I think, one of the concepts that applies to life in general really well. Focus on the process, improve the process, and the results will deliver themselves. Any other? Yeah, I'll go here first.
Question for the panel. What do you guys think would be a good way to try to promote more women into poker? I know in the last 5-10 years you do see more women, but I still think it's quite small relative to the male contingent. So if anyone wants to answer that.
Can I throw that question open to some of the ladies in the room? Hello. Do you play poker?
Oh, no.
What would make you more interested in playing poker?
I suppose it would be the funds.
The money? not the classic, not the classic response. Do you feel like poker is an intimidating activity for you? Do you feel like it's male dominated, or do you feel like you could join in like anyone else?
I feel like it would be intimidating to start playing poker, yes.
Is there anything that stands out as a reason why?
I'd say it's a lot of judgment.
Okay, okay. Let me ask Veselka. Here you go. How often have you played poker?
I don't play regularly. I play for work whenever it's necessary. It is male dominated. I feel intimidated in the industry as well. So if we are represented on a larger scale, I'll feel more at home, and I feel more comfortable playing, like more, welcome.
So you would feel more comfortable playing if there were more women there. So it's now a chicken and egg problem. We need more women to attract more women. Come on, Shirley, tell me a little bit about your experiences playing poker.
I've played poker, but I think from an industry side, I was having this discussion this afternoon. I think it's important to show the narrative and give the narrative that it can be a positive experience and that we are supporting each other and we'll be there to help each other out, not just by women, but also by the men.
Yeah, I mean, my observation is that I think poker's a lot more fun when there's women at the table as well.
Can I just quickly add something?
Yeah, go on.
So I mentioned earlier that I've been playing poker for 20 odd years. And in that time, my wife has never, ever come to a casino with me or to any of the tours or anything. And even though I've tried to get her to do that, she said, I find it overwhelming because sometimes the game gets a bit too serious. For me, it's kind of like I go for a bit of fun. I'm not really, I haven't got my eyes set on the first prize because I know I'm never going to probably get there. But for me, it's a bit of escapism from work or whatever. And for her, she's just like, you do your thing. I'm going to go into the spa and whatever else. And I'm like, well, actually, there's ladies' events going on now. Small buy-ins, you don't, and they're there, they're ambassadors to actually help you to feel comfortable within the game. So that's happening quite a lot in the UK. But I think, events like these and all the other tours, like for the bags that we supply, and when we do go to the events, it'd be nice to see a little bit more. There are some very well accomplished players who can compete with obviously everyone, but then there are those who are really at the basics of the game, and they shouldn't be penalized for making a mistake like string bets, which is probably what my wife would do.
Let me just come to Natalie. I want to hear more from the ladies in the room here.
I really feel it comes down to representation. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Think about Vicky Corrin. Think about Liv Beret. Think about Jean Davids. These are all powerhouses in poker and feel very comfortable being at the table. Rebecca McAdam. But it's 3, it's 4. When the first time I walked into a poker room, I was terrified. And I consider myself a pretty confident human. I can, talk to most people. But poker for me, the first time I walked into it, I didn't want to. When I was managing the Australia's Poker Tour, I just sort of like, could you just go and, when I had to go and speak to a player, I'd be like, I don't really feel comfortable being in that room with 100, 200 men. I don't know what I was thinking, but I didn't feel comfortable. And I don't see that having changed much, but it's across all aspects. It's not only at the table, it's the tournament director. It's the director in amongst operators. Yes, it's getting better, but I definitely think, we live in a man's world, so we need to sort of kind of change the world overall, really.
I'm going to put somebody on the spot here, and she's smiling at me and she hates me. Tara Smith works with me at Fated Spade as our director, but she's also the president of the Women's Poker Association. So I think this is a great question for her to talk about because this is something she lives every day.
I heard a lot of feedback and I heard a couple questions. So which questions specifically? Yeah. Well, a couple things hit home. Bankroll is typically one of the top 3. Scheduling, being a mom and having children, that's typically something. So having ladies events on the weekends where it makes it more accessible for them to be able to travel and come is one thing instead of in the middle of the week. And then another thing too is something that you mentioned and that you mentioned, being intimidated when you walk into a room and you've never been in that room before and you look around and you see a sea of men and only a few women. That can be uncomfortable if you've never experienced that before. And so the Women's Poker Association, we really celebrate and elevate women in poker on all levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And something as small as, for example, if we go to a WPT like World Championship and the women want to meet us at the cashier's cage and we show them this is how you buy in, this is where you go to register for tournaments, things like that all of us take for granted that play quite often, but someone new to the game may not understand, and that might be the one hurdle for them that keeps them from coming to the game. So breaking it down in those aspects I think is really helpful. Another huge thing, and this has been something that I've been talking about for almost 20 years now in the poker industry, I think we're really fantastic at marketing to men. I think we can do a much better job at marketing to women.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Can I say, I just want to add something that hasn't been mentioned, and this is another, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said there. There's another bit that isn't talked about much, right? And Kirsten Foxen, like all of the other names that were mentioned, Vicky Corn and Libri, right? Vanessa Selps wasn't mentioned. The one thing they all have in common is they bluff. Right? And Kirsten, she did a very interesting interview recently that I was listening to, and she was saying that actually, it's funny, at the poker table, the only time she's got bad treatment has been by other women, yeah? Right? Which is interesting, you know? And she was saying that. Now, generally, she says people are very respectful, so the intimidation of coming into play seems like a bigger thing, yeah? Which makes sense. So the bit I'm going to mention about is another thing which I think would actually help women. That apparently what happens to many women is they feel like they want to bluff, but they think that people will look at them badly if they do. Believe it or not, yeah? So there's a common experience or a frequent experience that they feel like they're doing something wrong, yeah? And Kirsten herself talked about this, that she was a bit more like that. And then she was talking to someone and they basically said, no, it's okay. It's all right. You can do that. And once she'd stepped over that barrier, this is from a pure poker playing perspective, that was the big difference. And all of the poker players you mentioned, I mean, I know a lot of them, they all at some point had it in their DNA or stepped over that barrier. So if that was included in the discussion with women, because it's just a trick of the mind. Yeah. And yeah.
And something else on that note too is I think that community is a big thing, and we have that in poker, especially for women in poker. And so when you have a community that you can join of like-minded people, whether it's beginners, intermediate, or advanced, you can ask those questions. You can ask people, how did you act in those situations? How could I have played that better? And I think that that's going to be an important thing to continue growing the game. And that's why if you know of women that want to play, I think connecting them with the community, and there's so many out there. And so it's almost like, you know, we've got a million different people that make cars. That's because not everyone likes the same car, just like not everyone's going to fit into the same group. And so there's so many. So find your people, find your group, find a home. And then when you become comfortable, that's when your game's going to excel.
I just want to, that's a great point. And I just want to share something real quick about what a business is actually doing to bring more women into poker. And I'm sorry, I feel like I've been talking a little bit, but this is important. The Venetian in Las Vegas just hired Jamie Kerstetter from our team, one of the
Not in the room.
Not in the room. Sorry, I'm pointing at the poster. The Venetian just hired, okay, listen, they hired her, they are paying her, they are investing in her to run monthly women's meetup games at the Venetian. That means Jamie invites all women, whether you've played poker before or not, whether you're a professional or an amateur, to come play for 3 hours in an environment that's all women. They give out spa packages, they play low stakes, they do training beforehand, And it creates this community that Tara is talking about that makes people feel comfortable coming into play. This is directly from Jamie's mouth, not mine. And the first time they did this at the Venetian, they had like 36 women showed up where like 20% of them never played before. So I would just say like that's a good scenario where if you run a poker room or an operation, like think about doing something like that. Think about making some very specific intentional decision to bring in a female influencer to have nights that are dedicated to women playing poker. And I think you'll see, not in mass, but when those things happen, you're opening the door more. And that's not from my mouth. That's just something Jamie has told me, and I know she would appreciate me sharing today.
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, guys, I promise the last thought. I just wanted to mention too, because I've heard this from a lot of professional female women poker players, as well as a lot of, professional men poker players. They don't understand why we have to have the need of ladies events in general, right? That's always a big question. And it's not that we want to create divide and keep them separate. What we want to do is create that comfort atmosphere to get them to that next level, which is playing into open events. Like that's always the ultimate goal. For the women that stay back and continue playing the ladies events, it's because of the community. It's because it's just a different type of event. We have champagne, we've got pot prizes, we celebrate the final table. It's a different type of event. And so if they stay playing in those, it's because they love them and they enjoy them, but it's definitely not meant to keep them playing in those. It's not meant to create division. It's meant to actually take them to the next step of joining the open events.
Thanks very much. Yeah, one more.
As someone who runs a room, second Monday of every month, we're already doing it. we've got.
Great, good on you. I wanted to come around the women in the room because I think we solve this problem by listening to what women have to say, not by sitting around as a group of men and trying to figure it out. So thank you for your contributions. Really appreciate that.
One really quick, just a resource. I came across this woman. Her name is Jenny Just. She happens to be a billionaire. She has a talk with her daughter on TED, and she started something called Power Poker. I'm just looking at their Instagram. Poker Power. Yeah, it's teaching life skills like confidence, strategic thinking, and decision making through the game of poker. And they have like a women's focused poker learning where they learn about this bridge of life skills through the game of poker. And I think things like that are amazing. Obviously, what you're doing is incredible too. Like things like that are incredible, and just shows like the power of a couple organizations working together to really make exponential change. So that's amazing. Yeah,
it's excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry, you look quite a lot like Ciaran from the side. Antonio.
Unfortunately, we had a couple of speakers who couldn't attend the event for they had visa problems. In particular, one person was really heartbreaking. I really wanted this person to be here, and we worked on his workshop for a few weeks. And he was meant to speak about vulnerable people and how there are predatory practices within the gambling industry, specifically and disproportionately targeting those society's margins. And he was coming here to speak about how we can explore a better future where the gambling industry is not actively targeting vulnerable people and minorities. And I hope that this is going to be something that the industry is going to take care of in the future. And I wanted to ask you, what can we do to come up with better practices that are protecting instead of targeting vulnerable people?
I actually want to take that first. I want to just challenge the assumption that has happened intentionally in the past. I'm sure whoever this person was had some very insightful things to say. I've worked in the gambling industry now for 20 years. I've worked for a number of different companies in that time. I've never known anybody to explicitly set out to target vulnerable people. From time to time, vulnerable people do come along, and they need to be treated with empathy and kindness, and you need to be able to. The hard part is figuring out who they are before the harm is caused. I think that's maybe the challenge that we have. But I've certainly never known anybody to intentionally target people in that group. Any comments from the stage? It's a tough one. I know there were a number of safer gambling panels here that got some really good engagement, so I'm sure this topic would have been discussed a little bit. Ciaran, you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, it's so much lighter this side of the stage. It really is. I have a few things to come off with. I know everyone's sick and tired of my voice and see me at this point. I've been up there the entire week. But there's two things I want to take away. First and foremost, I cannot say thank you to Antonio and Fintan more for giving me this chance. When Antonio first reached out to me and asked me would I be the moderator for this entire event, I thought you had lost it. Genuinely thought you'd cracked. I thought I'd cracked more by even agreeing to it, but however. This entire experience has been amazing for me, as it has been for Antonio. I can't thank yourself and Fintan more for the opportunity. But what I will say is, like Alex, like all of you, most of my adult life has been in this industry. But I spent my time behind the desk, behind the screen, working with the vulnerable people, that side of the business that very rarely got talked about, was never ever enjoyed. What I can say from this entire experience and the build up to now and meeting you all and talking to you is, from someone who has lived poker their entire life, I have fallen back in love with this game. For years, it was work, and obviously I'd see the worst of the worst every day. Not all of it, but that was the side of the business I had to deal with. So I would deal with Alex's team, and I do it all different teams, but I always had to work with that side. This entire experience, entire experiment for a poker conference has, if nothing else, reignited my love of this game and why I got into it years ago. To remember that it is fun, that there are good stories, there are good memories, there are good experiences. I've got to meet some of the people I idolized. Andy, for instance, when I was growing up. I got to meet Porrick, I've got to meet Fintan. So if nothing else, I want to ask you all, have you enjoyed this as much as I have?
Okay, I think we'll start to wrap it up. So who has the final question or the final observation of the day? Dun, dun, dun. I will pick on you.
Alex, can I just, I was speaking with Paul Moyes earlier and what his expectations were running a card room and having poker operators coming and hosting their events there. I mean, it was quite interesting to see what he expected and how he thought the actual game could improve in terms of numbers and everything else. If we can just...
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Paul, yeah?
Hi, yeah, I'm Paul. I'm the head of poker for Aspers in London. You're trying to take it back deep when we were just coming back up to the surface again. But yeah, basically what we were talking about earlier was there was a lot of good feedback about experiences and player expectation. But obviously running the card room, not only is it the incoming players that have an expectation, it's the local players, it's the regular players, the players that use that card room week in, week out. So when any sort of festival comes to my door, and I'm a big believer that I should be having different experiences for the players all the time. Fintan comes along to see me. I've worked with lots of other different partners, but they all need to bring something unique to the table, you know, because it can't just be the same tournament with different branding. There's got to be a different experience. So, you know, when the Irish guys come, they know they're going to bring a fun crowd with them that are there to play poker and have fun. I was just talking to a guy recently, his whole theme is around beer. And he wants to bring a tour to my place. And as soon as he opened his mouth, I was like, yeah, we're doing it. You know, because it is bringing something different for the players. I was talking to Antonio. They're going to be coming to visit us as well. But it's very important that when you're crunching the numbers and you're looking at the guarantees and how many players you're going to bring along, it can't just be players. It can't just be buy-ins. It's got to be the whole package, and it's great hosting the Irish guys. Really look forward to it because we know it's going to be fun while they're here. Well, they're not here. But, and it's just something to bear in mind. And I just wanted to bring it up. And when you guys are planning your things and looking at your numbers, just think about what makes you, you, and what you're bringing to the table when you come. Because my players look forward to you coming, and I want to give them that experience every time. And it's got to be different. Whatever your USP is, I want to be pushing it to my players. That's all I wanted to bring up. So I didn't want to take it too deep. But I just would like to say it's been so refreshing to come to something that is poker focused. I've trawled around trade exhibitions for casinos and gaming lots and lots of times, and you find the two people huddled in the corner that know what you're talking about. So it's nice to come along and talk to my peers, if you like. And I hope it happens again. And I'll make it for all the days. I couldn't make it for all the days this time, but yeah, I'd definitely like to come back, and I'd like to say thank you to the hosts.
Thank you very much. I think we will wrap it up there unless anybody is desperate to say anything more. Okay. Thank you very much to Alec, Andy, Tom, and Karim on stage with me. And thank you to all of you for participating in this discussion and the conference over the last few days. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Stand up? Yeah. Alex, sit together. Thank you as well.
Alex, stop the moderator.
All right,